Sorry about it. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, so let's talk about the Dion by Plutarch. It's like a very notable figure, and it's part of the Greek history that we didn't talk much about. Like after the Peloponnesian War, I don't think we addressed whatever happened in Sicily, and this is exactly the whole event started uh, at the not Dion himself, but Dionysus the
Hey,
elder.
Greg, I think we have, at least I'll speak just for myself. I'm having trouble hearing you just like the last time. It's just a low volume.
Oh man, I don't think it's
Greg,
a volume.
any way you can take
If you can speak closer to the speaker, maybe that would be
Yeah,
good.
I'll speak closer. And by the way, if you don't hear me like you start again, please tell me about it. I'll move it closer. I may forget later on. So
Yeah,
I
you
don't
have
wanna-
one of those microphones hanging down, right? Near,
yeah. I'm just holding it right next to my mouth right now.
Exactly. Yeah, that might get tiring after a while, though.
Yeah, I mean, if I forget, remind me. So, I don't want it to go to waste. So, yeah, so the events were the Dionysus, the elder, came to power before the end of the Peloponnesian War in 406 BCE. You remember the only thing we heard about Syracuse was this disastrous campaign of Athens against Syracuse that was designed by Alcibiades, and that's probably it took a wrong turn for Athens in that war. But then later on, what happened is Dionysus came to power. And Dion was a very important figure. I don't know if all of you read it, but we're going to read a big parts of it. I put an expert. So this is the excerpt. So this is the coin with Dion in it. So this is the image that we have of him, which is genuine. Doesn't happen that often. So as we usually go through this, that's how I lead this meeting about the ancient text. We read. I specifically do this, and so this is the. I'll read this one. I'll start, and then if anyone wants to read, or I'll read.
Greg.
Yeah.
I just wanted, before we start, could you tell us a bit of the background of what I guess Rome as a city-state existed, but what was the state of Italy, of mainland Italy proper at this time?
Okay, so we're talking about like 400 and between 400 and 350, like roughly, okay, the period. Dionysius the Younger died in 344. So and Dionysius the Elder came to power in 406. So this is like 300 to 400 to 350. So we're talking about that. If you remember, in the Italy at this point, all the southern Italy, all the way up to Naples, is the Greek, mostly Greek colonies. Cumae, that was the colony near the in the Napoli Bay, very major Greek city, and then north of that there are Latins, there is Rome, and Rome just became a kind of a regional power, because we talked about the invasion of Gauls happened in 387. That's when the Rome was sacked. So that's exactly the same period of time when the events are taking place here. So Rome is still kind of regional power. It's got some territory from Etruscans, the city of Veii up north, and some Latin and maybe Walshy cities, and that's it. And north of Rome, there are some Etruscans, and of course, the Gauls invaded at the time. So at this point, Rome is out of the picture from Sicily. So the main presence on Sicily is the Greeks and Carthaginians, they basically divided the Sicily, and Dionysius the Elder came to power as a result of war with Carthaginians. So the Carthage held a number of cities, and he was very successful, and eventually um, uh, uh, was elected to be a supreme commander, and in 407, and then in 406 he seized the power and became the tyrant of Syracuse. So Syracuse was typical city-state, but expanded its power in Sicily to a few other cities, and also later on expanded power to some of the southern Italy. Uh, the heel, of the southern Italy, the inside the hill, area. That's where there was a lot of very important Greek colonies. Specifically, we know there was Crotona there, and there was a Sybaris. The word Sybaris. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly.
Sybaris.
Sybaris, yeah, Sybaris was the city right there next to Crotona, and Crotona is uh, very well known for a famous philosopher living there, Pythagoras, who actually at the end of the 6th century BCE, that's when in the competition with Sybaris, Crotona attacked Sybaris and destroyed the city because they envied their lifestyle. They apparently were commercially much more successful. So there are a lot of these cities there. Inside that hill, another city that is going to be, we're going to talk about this, is the city of Locris. That's where the Doris is from, one of the wives of Dionysius the Elder. So, what do you think?
Okay, thanks a lot. That's very interesting. Now, were these cities, Greek city-states or colonies, were they tied to particular city-states in Greece proper?
Yes, a lot of them were. As you know, the Syracuse itself is the colony of Corinth, and they definitely, it's a mother city. So there were like natural alliances. As a matter of fact, that's what happened during the Peloponnesian War, during the attack of Corinth. And Corinth was an ally of Sparta at the time, and they sent their reinforcements there to support Syracuse. So a lot of them were kind of connected, loosely connected. They do not report to them. They're independent. The colonies became independent. I mean, the city of Syracuse was a great city in its own right. Very large, huge population, a lot of influence. This was not a subordinate to Corinth in any way, but friendly city to its mother city. There was some connection. So and a lot of colonies like that's happened. So yeah. Any other questions? So let's go to the book itself. So I included some of the pieces of the story, especially those who never. So I'm going to read this one. It basically says it's a comparative life. Plutarch wrote comparative life or parallel life, and so he compares Dion with Brutus. And later we're not going to go into this, but in the beginning he says why. So I'm going to read this part. It's and that's the very beginning of the story. So neither Romans nor Greeks will quarrel with the academy, since they fare alike in the treatise containing the lives of Dion and Brutus. Uh, Brutus, the one who participated in the assassination of Caesar. For Dion was an immediate disciple of Plato, while Brutus was nourished on the doctrines of Plato. Moreover, the fortune of the two men, which were the same in what befell them, rather than in what they elected to do, make their lives alike. Not what they did, I mean, because he did not assassinate anyone, Dion, I'm talking about, but they were both, as a result, killed. Even Brutus committed suicide, but he was forced. For both were cut off untimely, without being able to achieve the objects to which they had determined to devote the fruits of their many and great struggles. So, so he kind of like trying to liken them, that they both had ideas and they were both great men and tried to achieve something, but they didn't manage, um, you know, to do this. So this is the coin of Dionysius the Elder. You know, he was a tyrant. He actually, so he lived from 432 to 367, and he was actually considered to be like one of the worst tyrants. I mean, like a lot of people uh, say. And by the way, he starts the story um, about writing about Dionysius the Elder. Uh, so, all right. Anyone wants to read this one, or I could continue? All right, I'll continue, and then maybe later someone else will. So Dionysius the Elder, after assuming the reins of government, at once married the daughter of Hermocrates, the Syracusan. But she, since the tyranny was not yet securely established, was terribly and outrageously abused in her person by the seditious Syracusans, and in consequence put an end to her own life. So he lost his first wife, but he was not a really tyrant at the time. Then Dionysius, after resuming the power and making himself strong again, married two wives at once. One from Locri, remember that city from southern Italy, whose name was Doris. The other, a native of the city of Syracuse, Aristomache, daughter of Hipparchus, who was leading a man in Syracuse and had been a colleague of Dionysius when he was first chosen general with full powers for the war. That was the war with Carthage. It is said that he married both wives on one day, and that no man ever knew with which of the two he first consorted, but that even after he continued to devote himself alike to each. It was their custom to sup with him together, and they shared his bed at night by turns. And yet, the people of Syracuse wished that their countrywoman, Aristomache, should be honored above the stranger, but Doris had the good fortune to become mother first. And by presenting Dionysius with his eldest son, which is Dionysius the younger, she atoned for her foreign birth. Aristomache, on the contrary, was for a long time a barren wife, although Dionysius was desirous to have children by her. At any rate, he accused the mother of his Locrian wife of giving Aristomache drugs to prevent conception and put her to death. So you could imagine what kind of tyrant he was. He just, put mother of one of his wives to death because of some suspicion. I mean, I
Greg, Greg, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but women, they didn't have any power anyway. So, I mean, what is the big thing?
What is the big thing? I mean,
Well,
like,
at
yeah,
first, I didn't understand
you could
why-
dominate
why-
your wife, but you don't have to kill her mother. I mean, like just,
Well, you don't
know,
have to kill anybody anyway, but the first one that was so abused in her person that she killed herself, I mean, they were abused in their person all the time. I mean,
No, the first one, I'm not talking. The first one was abused not by him. She was abused by seditious Syracusans because he lost power at some point, and they were abusing her, and they were in very difficult circumstances. But I'm talking about he later on he married two wives, one Doris and one Aristomache. By the way, Aristomache is the sister of Dion, the guy that we're talking about. So that's the connection. So he married two wives, and that was unusual. That people never did this. I mean, it wasn't common practice. And he was a person who, like, whatever comes to his mind, he could do whatever he wants. He really abused his power. Yeah, one thing you dominate in the family, but killing a mother or like doing whatever it's a little bit, there are levels. Well, anyway,
Hi, Greg.
yeah.
A question on in Plutarch, the use of the term tyrant or tyranny. I guess this means a ruler, somebody who seizes power. Is a tyrant necessarily a bad, brutal ruler, or is anybody who seizes power a tyrant?
I think by this time, it's before it was someone who just strong man who really holding tight the power in his hand. But by this time, with the introduction of Plato and introduction of philosopher king idea, then they started to distinguish, and the tyrant started to get a little bit bad connotation because you could be king or the tyrant, and tyrant meant that you're abusing your power. So it started to change at this time, and we will see because Plato is involved here all this time. Okay. Any other questions?
No?
Okay. So so again, at this point, we know that he is in full power. He is still using his power. Okay. So now we okay. Dion is the brother of Aristomache, and so let me read this part as well because there is a little one phrase is missing here because it says, now Dion was a brother of Aristomache, and at first was honored only because of his sister. Afterwards, however, he gave proof of his wisdom and was presently beloved by the tyrant for his own sake. But though Dion was even before of a lofty character, magnanimous and manly, he advanced still more in these high qualities when by some divine good fortune Plato came to Sicily. Dion was then quite young, but of all the companions of Plato, he was by far the quickest to learn and the readiest to answer the call of virtue, as Plato himself has written. As soon as he got a taste of rational philosophy, which led the way to virtue, his soul was speedily on fire. From his own ready obedience to the call of higher things, that the same argument would have a like persuasive force with Dionysus, he earnestly set to work and at last brought it to pass that the tyrant in a leisure hours should meet Plato and hear him discourse. So he actually wanted to organize this meeting. He invited Plato eventually to the court of Dionysus the Elder, and Plato came about 388 BCE. Just for reference, keep in mind, Socrates died in 399. So this is 11 years after that. Plato set up academy back in Athens, but now he came to meet Dionysus. So it was really an important character. All right. Anyone wants to read this part?
I can read it.
Okay.
At this meeting, so this was the meeting between Plato and Dionysus, I guess.
Yeah.
At this meeting, the general subject was human virtue, and most of the discussion turned upon manliness. And when Plato set forth those tyrants, least of all, set forth those tyrants, least of all men had this quality.
So, excuse me. He kind of insulted at this point the Dionysus, right? I guess that's the correct way to pronounce it. He insulted him because he is the tyrant, and he was talking the tyrants usually are not manly. Okay, look what happened next.
At last, he, I guess Dionysus, got exceedingly angry and asked the philosopher Plato why he had come to Sicily. And when Plato said that he was come to seek a virtuous man, the tyrant answered and said, "Well, by the gods, it appears that you have not yet found such a one." Dion thought that this was the end of his anger, and as Plato was eager for it, sent him away upon a trireme which was conveying Paulus the Spartan to Greece. But Dionysus privily requested Paulus to kill Plato on the voyage, if it were in any way possible, but if not, at all events, to sell him into slavery, for he would take no harm, but would be quite as happy being a just man, even if he should become a slave. Paulus, therefore, as we are told, carried Plato to Aegina, and there sold him, for the Aeginetans were at war with the Athenians and had made a decree that any Athenian taken on the island should be put up for sale.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a very interesting thing that happened. You know, Plato was sold into slavery by Dionysus the Elder. I mean, it's really outrageous. The greatest philosopher of his time became a slave, and you know, Aegina is a island not very far from Athens, by the way. If you remember, it's Aegina, then there was Salamis, and then there is a mainland in Athens. Uh, so they were at war with Athenians at the time. So, but fortunately, you know, at this point, most of historians believe that it was a Cyrenaic philosopher, Aniceris, who fairly shortly brought Plato back to freedom. He paid supposedly 20 minas of silver. So minas or minus, that was a measure, weight measure, something around 1 pound. So imagine for 20 pounds of silver, that must have been quite a sum. So he bought him out and sent him home. You know, so I think the Cyrenaic school. I wonder. I'm not sure if it's from Libya, because you know Cyrenaic in Libya, or it's a school from Euboea, because I think there was a school, Cyrenaic school in Euboea at the time. So after, by the way, yeah. Okay. So now we know that this happened. And eventually what happened, the after that, Dionysus, that's the right pronunciation. So he was ruling for a while, and I think he died in 367. And now this is the Dionysus the Younger. That's another coin. That's his son from Doris, from Locus. So in a way, Dion, Dion is his uncle, not by blood, because he's a brother of the other wife, but he has a lot of influence in the city. And now, you know, we're gonna talk about the the relationship, like what Diane wanted to achieve with Dionysus, because now that uh, uh, Dionysus the Elder was dead, he wanted to bring back Plato because he wanted to achieve this ambition of Plato to educate philosopher king, and thought like maybe he could make a difference because this son was not turning out to be very good. Okay, anyone want to volunteer to read this one?
I can read, Greg.
Okay, go ahead.
The tyrant's son, as I have said, Dion, so to be Drawford,
Dwarf, dwarf.
sorry, and reformed in character from his lack of education, and therefore exhorted him to apply himself to study and to use every entreaty with the first of the philosophers to come to Sicily. And when he came, he became his discipline in order that his character might be regulated by the principles of the virtue, and that he might be conformed to the divinest and the most beautiful model of all being, in obedience to whose direction the universe issues from disorder in order. In this way, he would procure greater happiness from himself and great happiness for his people, and that obedience which they now rendered dejectedly and under the compulsion of his authority, this his moderation and justice would base upon goodwill and filial spirit, and he would become a king instead of a tyrant. Since Dion frequently gave him such an advice and artfully mingled with it some of the Plato's doctrines, Dionysius was seized with a keen and even frenzied passion for the teachings and companionship of Plato. At once, then, many letters began to come to Athens from Dionysius, and many injunctions from the Dion, as well as the others from the Pythagorean philosophers of Italy, all of whom urged Plato to come and get control of a youthful soul now tossed about on a sea of the great authority and the power, instead it by his weighty reasoning. Plato, accordingly, as he tells us himself, out of shame more than anything else, lest men should think him nothing but theory and unwillingly to take any action, and further became he expected that by the purification of one man who was, as it were, and a controlling factor, he would cure all Sicily of her distempers, yielded to these requests.
Okay, so now Dionysius the Elder died in 367, and immediately Plato comes. You know, there was sent letters to him. They were invited again. Dion, in a way, like the senior advisor to Dionysius the younger, Dionysius the second, and he wants to, Plato to give a positive influence on the new ruler, and maybe, educate and create a philosopher king, someone who will rule out of sense of virtue, rather than being a tyrant. And as you see, even the Plutarch here uses the difference between king and the tyrant. And hopefully, and they hope to restructure the government to be more moderate, so that's their ambition. Now, okay, so now that's going to be the next development. All right. Any volunteers to read this part?
I can read it.
Okay.
Dion has written to the Carthaginian officials, urging them whenever they should treat with Dionysius for peace, not to hold the interview without including him, since he would help them to arrange everything securely. This letter Dionysius read to Philistus, and after consulting with him, according to Timaeus, he beguiled Dion by a feigned reconciliation. That is, after moderate protestation and the declaration that their quarrel was at an end, he led him off alone beneath the Acropolis down to the sea, and there showed him the letter and accused him of conspiring with the Carthaginians against him. And when Dion wished to defend himself, he would not suffer it, but at once placed him just as he was on board of a small boat and commanded the sailors in it to set him ashore in Italy. As for Plato, Dionysius at once removed him to the Acropolis, where he contrived to give him a guard of honor under pretense of hospitable kindness, in order that he might not accompany Dion and bear witness to his wrongs. But after time and intercourse that accustomed Dionysius to tolerate his society and discourse, just as a wild beast learned to have dealings with men, he conceived a passion for him that was worthy of a tyrant, demanding that he alone should have his love returned to by Plato and be admired beyond all others. And he was ready to entrust Plato with the administration of the tyranny, if only he would not set his friendship to Dion above that which he had for him. At this juncture, however, a war broke out, and he sent Plato away, promising him that in the summer he would summon Dion home. This Plato tried to effect and kept Dion with him in the academy, where he turned his attention to philosophy. Dion dwelt in the upper city of Athens with Callippus, one of his acquaintances.
Okay, so here it's so Dionysius the second obviously was burdened by his senior advisor and who had a lot of influence and respect of the Syracusans. So he wanted to get rid of him, and eventually he used this, and it happened in 366, just like 1 year after his father's death. Plato came and he got rid of Dion and sent him away. So Dion went to Athens, and eventually Dionysius, though he was very honored, because as you see here, he calls Plato the first of the philosophers. I mean, he was like the most famous at the time. So he was very flattered and wanted to cater to him, but in truth, he just wanted to keep him there, Plato, because it gave him some prestige to have Plato in his city. Well, eventually Plato came back to Athens, and Dion stayed there and studied in the academy with another fellow, Callippus. He's also a very important figure. He is fellow Syracusan, who eventually you will see, will wrestle the power out of him in Syracuse later on. Philistus is the historian at the time, and he helped Dionysius to become independent of Dion and sent him away. So I'll read this one. So, but by the way, anybody wants to ask anything or comment?
On the previous page, it said that he reached out to the Carthaginian official.
Yeah.
How involved Carthaginians were at the time in Sicily?
or very involved. They basically shared the island with Greeks. And what the reason he wanted to do that is that because he was not sure what Dionysius the younger will do, because he was incompetent, and he wanted to make sure, he wanted to make sure that the adults will negotiate. So he asked them, to include him all the time because he want to make sure that they're gonna make sense of these negotiations, and that to them he said that he will make sure that Syracuse will stand by whatever they agreed upon, because you can never rely on Dionysius, whatever comes to his mind. But Dionysius obviously was insulted by this. I mean, it's like patronizing and, going behind his back, because he learned about this letter, and that gave him a reason to get rid of Dion or Dion. Okay. So, but as the time went, so Dion is in Athens right now with Plato. But as the time went on, Dionysus became jealous of Dion and afraid of his popularity among the Greeks, not only Syracusans, the Greeks, because he was renowned to be a man of a high character, distinguished pupil of Plato. He therefore stopped sending him his revenue and handed his estate over to his own private steward. That was like a very extreme step, because Dion at the time was a very rich man, and his estates in Syracuse basically supported his lavish lifestyle in Athens. So he really created a big problem for him. Um, so they went. So they sent Archidemus to Plato, and Dionysius also sent a trireme for him and friends to entreat and return. He also wrote to him himself, he wanted Plato back, in clear and express terms, saying that no mercy should be shown to Dion unless Plato were persuaded to come to Sicily. But if he were persuaded, every mercy will be accorded to Dion. Dion also received many injunctions from his wife and sister that he should beg Plato to listen to Dionysius and not afford him an excuse for further severity. Thus, it was then that Plato, as he himself says, came to the third time to the Straits of Scylla. This is the straits that leads to the Syracuse. So he was kind of like forced to come to Syracuse for the sake of Dion, because Dionysius kind of insisted he wanted Plato next to himself, not for his teachings, obviously, but for the prestige. His arrival filled Dionysius with great joy, and the Sicilians again with great hope. They all prayed and labored zealously that Plato might triumph over Philistus and philosophy over tyranny. Philistus, if you remember, the guy who helped Dionysius get rid of Dion. He is a historian and a philosopher, local, and he was supporting tyranny of Dionysius. And people now, when Plato came around, was hoping that with his teachings of virtue, things would change. So after the first act of kindness, however, Plato introduced the subject of Dion. And then there were postponements at first on the part of Dionysius, and afterwards fault finding and disagreements. At last, Dionysius sold the estate of Dion and appropriated the money, and removing Plato from his lodging in the palace garden as well, put him in charge of his mercenaries. Can you imagine Plato is in charge of mercenaries? So mercenaries who had long hated the philosopher and sought to kill him on the ground that he was trying to persuade Dionysius to renounce the tyranny and live without bodyguards. So, so Dionysius really put Plato at risk, by making him the head of the mercenaries that wanted to right, I'll keep going. The case was as follows. After the expulsion of Dion, and when Dionysius was sending Plato back, he bade him, like eventually he sent him back. He bade him to learn from Dion confidentially whether he would oppose his wife marrying another man. Very interesting proposal. Plato finally came to Athens because he wanted to get out of there, and had confirmed with Dion about everything. He wrote a letter to the tyrant which spoke of other matters in a way that was clear to anybody, but of this particular matter, I'm talking about Dion wrote the letter, in the language that could be understood by Dionysius alone, saying that he had talked with Dion about that business, and Dion would evidently be exceedingly angry if Dionysius should carry it through, meaning marrying his wife, Dion's wife, to someone else. Now, as long as there were many hopes of reconciliation, the tyrant took no violent measures with his sister, but sister is Aristomache, remember that sister, yeah. But suffered her to continue living with Dion's young son. When, however, the estrangement was complete, and Plato, who had come to Sicily a second time, had been sent away in enmity, then he gave Arete, Arete is the wife of Dion, in marriage against her will to Timocrates, one of his friends. So eventually he carried through his thing. Not only that, he took Dion's estates away from him and sold them out and kept the money, leaving him without money to live on. But he also married his wife against the will of one of his friends. I mean, Arete apparently was a very beautiful woman. So, and Plato was telling Dion that he should return. But when obviously when he put Dion in this situation, Dion decided that he's got to do something. So anybody wants to read this part? Okay.
Oh, I can go again.
Okay. Thanks.
From this time on, Dion turned his thoughts to war. With this Plato he would have nothing to do, out of respect for his tie of hospitality with Dionysus and because of his age. But Speusippus and the rest of his companions cooperated with Dion and besought him to free Sicily, which stretched out her arms to him and eagerly awaited his coming. Encouraged by this information from Speusippus, Dion collected mercenaries secretly and by the agency of others. The rendezvous was the island of Saxinthus, and here the soldiers were assembled. They numbered fewer than 800, but they were all well known in consequence of many great campaigns. Their bodies were exceptionally well trained, while in experience and daring they had no equals in the world, and were capable of inciting and inflaming to share their prowess all the host which Dion expected to have in Sicily.
Okay, so this happened in 357 when Dion finally sailed to Sicily. He was expelled in 366, so this is 9 years later. He is coming back with mercenaries, and as we learn later, because of his reputation and the respect, there are a lot of people who joined him. Okay, so yeah, that's a big one. Anyone wants to read? Okay, I'll read it.
You should have said that it was a little one, and then people would have read it. I could read it. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dionysius,
just
therefore,
turn the air conditioner on. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, read it. I'll be right back.
Dionysius, therefore, was destined to learn of a war in Sicily late and from the other sources. But meanwhile, as the Dion proceeded on his march, after Dion had entered the city by the Themenid gate, he stopped the noise of the people by a blast of the trumpet and made proclamation that Dion, Megaclass, who were come to overthrow the tyranny, declared the Syracusans and the rest of the Sicilians from the tyrant. At first, Dionysius sent envoys privately to Dion and tried to make terms with him. But this was a treacherous pretense on the part of the tyrant, a piece of knavery that directed against the Syracusans, for he kept in close custody the deputation that came to him from the city, and toward morning plied his mercenaries with strong wine and sent them on a dash against the siege wall about the Acropolis. The attack was unexpected. The barbarians, with a great boldness and loud tumult, began to tear down the cross wall and attack the Syracusans, so that no one dared to stand on a defensive except the mercenaries of Dion, who first noticed that disturbance and came to the rescue. But at last, Dion, since no one could hear his orders, wishing to show by his example what should be done, charged foremost into the barbarians. Then there arose about him a fierce and dreadful battle, since he was recognized by the enemy as well as by his friends. And all rushed toward him at the same time with a loud shout. The victory was a brilliant one, and the Syracusans rewarded Dion mercenaries.
Okay, so now, as you can see, Dionysius came. He was hailed, and by the way, he came with his companions, Megacles and Callippus. You know, again, Callippus, remember that name? And local leaders greeted him, and what happened? They eventually Dionysius fled, but then he returned with a fleet and managed to get back into the citadel. You know, and citadel was the Dion took the city, but he didn't take the citadel. So that's where Dionysius managed to hide later on.
Greg,
Yeah.
do you think, is the Citadel the same as the Acropolis?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
they're
you could
synonymous.
call it. It's like on a hill. It's a center of the town on a hill. It usually has walls. I mean, that's a typical Greek city. They have Acropolis. Was especially. I mean, we could see it right now. That hill was really steep. But yeah, often Citadel is elevated and protected by the wall.
And so the barbarians are the mercenaries of Dionysus. And I guess Dionysus is out of the city. Does Dionysus return to the city at some point in this? Because it doesn't say so, right?
Yes. And that's really what happened. Like a week after Dion takes the city, but he doesn't. But he didn't take the citadel. Dionysius sailed. He sailed from the southern Italy with mercenaries, and he stealthily entered the citadel, and he stayed there. And from there on, he wanted to retake the city, but the people were basically on the Dion side, so they started to lead the negotiation. So as you could see, the next one is
Hey, Greg, do you want just a real quick to clarify one point about the citadel in Syracuse? It's actually an island off the city, and by a matter of maybe 30 meters or something like that. Today, there's a pedestrian bridge that you cross over from the mainland
Yeah,
into
you talk about
over onto the citadel.
Ortega. You talk about Ortega.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I'm not sure that this is the citadel. You know,
Greg,
yeah.
Reading Dion, I remember I never been to Syracuse, but I had the same impression which Mark just mentioned, that it was it's somewhere in Plutarch's description is given.
It's on the island, right? Yeah, well, very
I don't
possible.
Makes
remember
sense.
where an island, but citadel was separate from the city and was
Yeah,
connected by
yeah,
the
that's
bridge.
right. Yeah, I've been to Syracuse. I remember Ortega very well. Yeah, very possible that that is so. I mean, actually, it's one of the most interesting parts of the city right now. I mean, it's kind of more of a Renaissance style right now. It's like a medieval city, but yeah, it's going to be it's called Ortega. Yeah. Have you been there, Mark? Um, have you been to Syracuse, Mark? Mark, because you were saying about this, but yeah, you're probably right. Anyway, May stepped out. All right, so let's read the next one.
I can read it.
Yeah.
Dionysus sent to Dion offering to surrender to him the Acropolis. These munitions of war and his mercenaries with 5 months full pay for this, and demanding for himself the privilege of retiring unmolested into Italy, and of enjoying during his residence there the revenues of Garta, a large and rich tract in the territory of Syracuse, extending from the sea to the interior of the island. Dion, however, would not accept these terms, but bade him apply it to the Syracusans, and these, hoping to take Dionysus alive, drove away his ambassadors. Upon this, the tyrant handed over the citadel to Apollocrates, his eldest son, while he himself, after watching for a favorable wind and putting on board his ships the persons and property he had held most dear, eluded the vigilance of Heraclitus, the admiral, and sailed off.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's very possible if he managed to yeah to get on the ship so easily and elude yeah that maybe it is the Ortega uh, uh, that part. So it's and but he still left his son right there uh, to keep it you know to keep this part because he was really hoping to retake Syracuse. All right, I'll read this one. And now Dion, seeing that fortune compelled him either to fight against his fellow citizens or perish with his mercenaries, apparently besought Syracuse and stretched out his hand to them, and pointing out to them the Acropolis, which was full of enemies, peering over, uh, uh, peering over the walls and watching what was going on below. But since no entreaties could stay the onset of the multitude, and the city, like the ship at sea, was at the mercy of the blast of its demagogues, he ordered his mercenaries not to take charge because the people at this point went against Dion. So he asked his mercenaries not to take charge, but simply to run towards the assailants with loud cries and brandishing of weapons, which being done, not Syracusans stood his ground. So he just wanted them to scare Syracusans so they would run away. Uh, Dion immediately ordered his men to wheel about and led them from forth to Leontini, and Leontinites received Dion with splendid honor, took his mercenaries into the service, and gave them civic rights. So Leontini is another city not very far from Syracuse, and when he realized that the citadel is still held by the son of Dionysius, and the people at this point started to turn against him, uh, uh, because at this point they also realized that Dion himself was not actually very open to the rule of democracy, because if you recall, as a pupil of Plato, and even Socrates, they were not big fans of philosophy of democracy. They actually preferred the philosopher king ruling. They actually thought that democracy would, because of its corruption and because it's a question of who can better manipulate the masses. They often produce not the best people to lead them. So now he goes to Leontini. At this point, Dion has, and this is like from other sources, approximately 3,000 uh, foreign mercenaries. These are very seasoned troops, but he figured that if Syracusans don't want him, he moved there, and the Antini were happy to have him because of his reputation, because they also granted civic rights to all the soldiers there, because they would be really protected, not as big a city as Syracuse. So now,
Just a quick, uh, Dion's mercenaries are people he brought from Greece.
well, yes,
Do
these
we
are the
know?
people. Yes, he brought from Greece, as we read, approximately 800, and
Yep.
then there were others who joined him in Sicily. So the mercenaries are not necessarily, but they're Greeks, but they're on his state. They're not serving the state. They're serving him personally. So, all right, I'll read this one. This is the big one. After this, they put in at the city triremes from Dionysius under the command of Nipsisus. So this is the Dionysius admiral, because Dionysius heard about this, that now Dion was expelled from the city. I mean, his son is still holding citadel, and he decided he brought his own fleet. He wants to retake the city. So the Nipsisus is the Napolitan. He brought the food and money for the beleaguered garrison of Acropolis. In a naval battle that ensued, the Syracusans were indeed victorious and captured 4 of the tyrant's ships, but they were made wanton by their victory, and in their utter lack of discipline, turned their rejoicing into a drinking bout and mad carousels, and were so neglectful of their real interests that when they thought themselves already in possession of the Acropolis, they actually lost both it and their city besides. However, now that necessity constrained them, some of the allies and horsemen cried out that Theon and his Peloponnesian should be summoned from Leontini. So you know who his mercenaries are. They're from Peloponnesus, a lot of them. Uh, Probably for a lot of them from the city of Corinth, I would imagine, because they're so connected. When he was seen leading his forces through the city against the enemy, shouts of joy and loud battle cry mingled with prayers and supplications were raised by the Syracusans, who called Dion their savior and God, and his mercenaries their brethren and fellow citizens. Uh, Nipsius and his men were overpowered. Most of them fled back into Acropolis, which was near, and so saved them. And those who were left outside and scattered hither and thither were pursued and slain by mercenaries. When it was day, not one of the other popular leaders would remain in the city, but passed judgment on themselves by taking to flight. Heraclitus and Theodotus, however, came of their own accord and surrendered themselves to Dion, acknowledging that they had done him wrong and begged him to treat them better than they have treated him. So what happened here is that so the Dion departed. Dionysius sent his admiral to overwhelm the city. Even though Syracusans won the battle, they still got drunk. And in the morning, while they completely unexpected, the remainder of the Dionysius forces under the admiral, they attacked half sleeping, half drunk Syracusans and took the city. And that's when they tried for help and called Dion from Leontini. And Leontini is very close, and Dion responded immediately. Came. Well, the admiral, the other admiral, those people here, Heraclitus and Theodotus, these are the Syracusans who commanded Syracusan fleet, but they were the ones who were expelling Dion from the city, and that's when he went to Leontini. So they were kind of his enemies, and now that he came and he commanded everything, they came to him and asked for mercy. So Dion, by the way, actually was magnanimous and actually granted them. He allowed Heraclitus to stay as an admiral because he was Syracusan. People respected him, and he said that he would share power with him. He will be the admiral or the commander of the fleet, while Dion would be commanding the army. Okay. Any volunteers to read this one? Okay, I'll read it. No one came to the help of the besieged, talking about the citadel. Provisions failed them, and the mercenaries became mutinous, so that the son of Dionysus gave up his cause for loss and made terms with Dion. The citadel he handed over to him, together with the arms and other equipment there, while he himself, taking his mother and sisters and manning 5 triremes, sailed away to his father. His father is in the southern Italy at this point. I think it's in the city of Locris. Dion allowed him to depart in safety. So Dion allowed him. You remember that mother of Dionysus, the second, is Doris of Locris. So that's why Dionysus, when he fled Turkey, he went to Locris in the south of Italy. For Heraclitus, once more set himself to oppose him, Dion, at this point. He gave him command, now he's opposing him. So next, he publicly denounced Dion for not demolishing the citadel and for checking the people when they set out to open the tomb of Dionysus and cast out his dead body. We're talking about Dionysus the elder. So the people were so angry at Dionysus, so they wanted to destroy citadel and throw out the body of former tyrant. But Dion stopped them because that's not something he approved of. Accordingly, since he expected that these measures would find their chief opponent in Heraclitus, and since the man was in every way turbulent, fickle, and seditious, he now yielded to those who had long wished to kill him, but whom he hitherto restrained, so that they made their way into the house of Heraclitus and slew him. His death was keenly resented by the Syracusans, but nevertheless, when Dion gave him a splendid funeral, followed, the body to his grave with his army, and then discoursed to them upon the matter. They came to see that it was impossible for the city to be free from tumult, while Heraclitus and Dion together concluded its affair. So he finally, like at least he gives them a credit. So he finally realized that he can't let Heraclitus live because they're going to be in opposition all the time. He has too much power. He had him murdered. So and so the Syracusans they insisting about like democratic rule, restoring democracy, because prior to Dionysius the Elder, there was democracy in Syracuse. So they wanted to restore the democracy and the redistribution of land, you know. Uh, but as we know again, Theon is not a fan. He is a true a Platonist. He is not a fan of democracy. He is resisting this. He wants to establish rule of the to have a ruler, have a senate with some democratic limitations. You know, it's not like it's not a tyranny that he wants to, but he wants to make a senate made up of aristocrats, um, and uh, and he didn't want to demolish the citadel. That clearly, didn't make sense. People were just angry at it. So, so what happens next? Yeah, we're almost at the end already. Um, Now there was a certain comrade of Dion named Callippus. You remember Callippus? That's an Athenian who, as Plato says, had become intimately acquainted with him, not as a fellow pupil in philosophy, but in consequence of initiation into the mysteries and the recurrent camaraderie which this brought. Uh, so I suspect what kind of mysteries must be Elysian mysteries. It's would be like something like we understand nowadays as like being a Mason, organization kind of. So in those days in ancient Greek, there were some ranks, and you become kind of like a secret organization that you support each other. But they also both studied in academia together as well. So he took part in Dion's expedition and was held in honor by him, so that he even entered Syracuse with him at the head of all his comrades, with garland on his head, after winning glorious distinction in battle. That's when Dion sailed with his mercenaries from Athens to take Syracuse in the beginning. So therefore, showing himself the wiliest of men, and altogether expecting that he would have Sicily as a reward for murdering his friend, and as some say, having received 20 talents from the enemy to pay him for doing the murder, he bribed some of the Dion's mercenaries into conspiracy against him, beginning his work in a most malicious and rascally manner. It actually was the Dionysius the second, who was in Locris, that bribed Calypso to murder Dion. Many had conspired to do the deed, and as Dion was sitting with his friends in an apartment containing couches for entertainment, some of the conspirators invested the house outside, while others stood at the door and the windows of the apartment. The actual assassin, who were Zacynthus, came in unarmed and without their cloaks. Then, at the same time, those outside closed the doors and held them fast, while those inside fell upon Dion and tried to strangle and crush him. Lycon, the Syracusan, handed through the window to one of the Zacynthians, that's a group of mercenaries, a short sword, and with this they cut Dion's throat as if he had been a victim at the altar. He had long since been overpowered and was quivering before the stroke. So that's that's kind of the end of it of Dion. Um, let me see, do I have anything else? That's the last one. And uh, so what happened is the Calypsus took the power afterwards. You know, he got generously paid by Dionysus, um, and he has, procured the assassination of Dion. He took the power. This happened in 354. So Dion basically came to Sicily in 357, and 3 years later he was dead. Um, so so what happened later, by the way, just to close up, I mean, this is the end of the end of the Plutarchus story, more or less. But what happened later that Dionysus eventually came to Syracuse again and regained the power. Uh, I think it was 8 years later, and and by the way, during this, with interesting details, that during uh, uh, this plot to kill Dion, uh, his wife Arete and his sister Aristomache, they kind of suspected Calyptus to have a plot, so they had, but Calypsus, he played very, very uh, interesting game, very complicated game. He originally betrayed a couple of soldiers to Dion who were plotting. So he was sure that Calypsus on his side, Calypus on his side. But when Arete and Aristomache suspected him, they forced him to take a great oath involving the ceremony of Persephone. You know, Persephone is the goddess of underworld. You remember, this story, how she was, um, uh, uh, who was abducted her into the underworld, and she was coming up. So there was a special ceremony, apparently very secret, very sacred, very dangerous. Like if you violate this ceremony, all kinds of horrible things happen to you. But anyway, Calyptus did take this vow in this ceremony, but then betrayed them anyway. And despite of his vow, he just still went ahead and assassinated uh, uh, Dion. So following Dion. So let me see what else do I have here. Yeah. So Dionysius the Younger, he returned to Syracuse in 346 BCE, 8 years after Dion's assassination, and then he regained the power, and after that there was an uprising. Uh, so several of the cities joined the Syracusans and attacked Dionysius. And actually successfully, Dionysius was forced back into the citadel. And in 344, um, you know, that's another hero of Greece at this point, Timoleon, arrived with troops and began the invasion of Sicily. Uh, and uh, uh, and Dionysius realized that he cannot stand up to Timoleon, and also uh, had no chance of victory. He arranged the surrender of the citadel and was given a safe passage to Corinth, which is the mother mother city of Syracuse. And he went to Corinth, and he died there a year later in a very kind of poor condition. So that was the end of the Dionysius the Younger, and the whole story of dynasty of Dionysius, two Dionysiuses, and tyranny in Syracuse. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. And
Very good. Thank you, sir.
any questions, comments?
No, this was very good. You know, an interesting story, definitely.
I
Yes,
guess
so-
my comment would be the Syracusans come off as pretty bad. They're pretty dumb, inconsistent. They're sort of a populist mob that just changes side from one moment to another, right? Plutarch,
like any mob, like
well,
the
Plutarch,
Athenians. Yeah, Plutarch probably. Yeah, I agree.
so and they don't really want to be led by anybody. Anybody who tries to lead them, they'll turn against. Whether they're good, if they're good, they'll turn against them because they're good. If they're bad, they'll turn against them because they're bad. So
Yeah.
Dion is the only character in the story who comes off well, right?
Yes, yes. That's why he wants to say that Dion wasn't that powerful, but he, through the whole life, I mean, he was well respected and loved. But yeah, I agree. So the mob rules, and the people are just like they don't like this, don't like that. They don't know what's good for them, and so they end up with the worst tyrant, a tyrant. You know, like that. Yeah, yeah. You're right. Yeah, I think that's the lesson here. And I mean, I read this way back, so I knew the story. It's like it's nice to refresh, uh, uh, you know. But I have to say, Dion, he is an exceptional. He's very interesting, and it's very interesting time in a ancient Greek history involving Plato so much. I mean, Plato was sold to slavery at some point. This is crazy, you know. And so I thought it was a very interesting piece of that history that was missing.
And I guess you seem to be saying that Plutarch's story of Dion seems to be quite accurate. Do we know that from other sources?
Yeah, I think yeah, they're mostly in agreement. And besides, I think Plutarch himself was a follower of the Plato in many ways. So you know, he was a priest at Delphi for most of his time. He, as a result of his parallel life, he became a celebrity, very trustworthy, at least. Uh, yeah, there were some other details. I haven't heard that many. To tell the truth, not only about Dion. I haven't heard that many ancient philosophers, or not philosophers, ancient historians, or anybody really conflicting with Plutarch that much about anything. Maybe some minor points, but I mean, that's, that's the story. Who knows how much of it is true? I'm sure people have their own views and prejudices, but Plutarch considered to be a person of great integrity, and he didn't have that much of a political interest. You know, he was out of politics. Uh, you know, the only thing from what I remember, he was a mayor of this small city near Delphi at some point, but mostly he was a priest, interpreting the, you know, making ceremony, running the administration of Delphi, of the Temple of Apollo, and interpreting maybe some Hebrewish, whatever. That's probably, you know, uh, yeah, yeah, I have a respect for him. First. Any other comments?
No, thanks, Greg.
That's yeah.
Thank you, Greg. Was a little bit hard to follow the story, but was good.
Greg, now the next one we're doing in the month is Timoleon.
Yeah, that's the guy who wrestled the power from Dionysus the Younger. It's a continuation of the story of Syracuse. Again, I just want to ask, uh, how many of you knew this story? I mean, like not with all details, but in general details of Dion.
I read it recently because I was considering presenting it, but then I realized I know too little, and any question about any other details I wouldn't be able to answer. That's why I decided not to do it.
Yeah, but recently, but prior to that, I mean, have
No,
you?
no, 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 no.
I mean,
I didn't know the name of Dion before that.
yeah, but yeah, I thought it's important to illuminate that you know, this kind of personality. Uh, did you find it interesting? Did you find it valuable?
It's definitely interesting. It's kind of there. I expected there would be some conclusion. There was no conclusion. We draw conclusion ourselves, but it ends up kind of rather abruptly, I would say.
Well, yeah, he's a biographer. He writes
Right,
what it
right,
is there,
right.
but yeah, this is not a fairy tale.
Well, no, could be some contemplations on
Yeah, some lessons. Well,
based on facts. There was no.
right. Well, I think like as he said in the beginning, like with the he compares him to Brutus. He
Right.
said they both people of great integrity, right?
Right.
You know, it's all you know, they're different because they really wanted to achieve a lot for the sake of the people. I mean, they believed in different things. I mean, Brutus
Correct.
wanted the republic, but this guy wanted philosopher king, a great ruler with some elements of democracy, but not a democracy. He didn't believe in it. You know, and they were their life were cut very early, and they were unable to achieve what they planned to, but they had a great plan, great capacity to
Yeah.
affect the change. But unfortunately, life is unpredictable, and he compares them as the two of them, people of great talent and integrity, but and they were cut short. That I think that's the story. That's the you know, life is unpredictable and things, but they're great men that worth note, and people should know about them.
Yeah,
That's how
I just want to say something. Please don't feel obligated to, present something that's gonna be like, we're just here like basically want to gain a general knowledge. Some people obviously have more knowledge because they've read over the years, but as long as you get something out of it by, and enjoy doing it, like tomorrow, I'll be truthful to you. I'm not even ready to present tomorrow, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm doing Khazars and Bulgars. I'm not the type of guy that I'm going to be shy from presenting just because I'm not 100% sure, or I didn't research something until, it's different. People have different levels. People have different, they learn something first time or they researched it. I think the most important thing that we enjoy this. Doesn't matter, as long as you don't sit here and convert oxygen into carbon dioxide, you're good. Because there's going to be a discussion. God knows how many times Rolf bailed me out. God knows how many times Greg bailed me out when I presented. And I'll be truthful with you, I'm not the best presenter. And I'm not, and probably one of the worst ones, but I enjoy this. And I want to present, I want to be out there. I want to give it a shot, like, listen, we're not getting paid for this. We're not trying to, maybe at some point when YouTube channel takes off, everybody's going to get, something out of it financially. But at the same time, right now, we're just trying to enjoy this. Marika did the philosophical piece, was amazing. She's going to do a couple of things on. Don't feel obligated that it has to be perfect. You just have to be what you make it to be. Right, Greg?
Let me ask you, are you guys interested to explore Timoleon? I mean, that's another great figure again in Syracuse, in Sicily.
So what I'm going to do is, Greg, I'm going to probably create, since people like polls in here.
Yeah. If
I will
people
throw
are
a poll.
interested, you know.
I'll throw a poll and say, do you guys want to present, and I'll give them a couple of options. Timoleon, I'm going to do a couple other, interesting options, and, maybe Brutus, stuff like that. We'll see, how that, going to go. And let's see, for next time, maybe people are going to be interested in certain subject matter. Maybe Alex will come back and want to present. Unfortunately, we have mostly people that want to present historical pieces, but the literal pieces, it's mostly you, me, and Paul this time. If anybody wants to step up and want to do it, we're all more than willing to give our.
Yeah, I understand. But with regard specifically to this ancient text, I mean, like, because I personally like to read, and as we go along with Roman history, we're definitely going to switch to the Roman figures, because we already we had a few figures we talked about, but reading Plutarch, there were many more details. Um, there are a lot of interesting, but I think that we already finished with Greek history. This is like different angles. This is white spots, something we left uncovered,
Right.
and I think it's a very important because it's really to think about this, that at the time of the Peloponnesian War, Syracuse was at least as big as Athens. It was a huge city. Maybe didn't have the same ambitions. It was not the empire, but as far as the city state, it was tremendous. I actually been to Syracuse. Really amazing. I was very
Yeah, right. No, yeah, we want to do one or two classical pieces, and maybe we even switch around and just do I don't know, Cicero defense when he was playing a role of a lawyer, and maybe we'll do a little, it's not a little piece, but it's nevertheless a piece of history, but it doesn't really, it's about Cicero in general. So, and I'm just saying, like, it's every time you read something, every time you want to present, your level is already above the regular, above the regular participant.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
learn something. Like I don't know anything about Volga Bulgars, but I'm learning it. So tomorrow I present it. I don't know a lot about Khazars. I'm learning it. I'm presenting it. I'm not necessarily going to be on a Richard's level, but I still, it's something I enjoy. I just want people to feel you have to enjoy this. That's all it is.
okay, all right, yeah, but I don't know, yeah, let's see. Rolf, Michael, are you interested to read Timoleon? Are you? Yes? No?
I'll see. I don't want to commit right now, but
No, I'm not asking committee. I'm just thinking,
no,
like, should we do it?
reading for sure. Presenting it for me, it's a different meta.
No, I can present. I'm just saying, like, are you interested to discuss it?
Yeah, I'm interested. I know almost nothing about this Sicilian aspect. Is an interesting
Yeah.
between Carthage and Greece, and then
Right.
and Italy. So this is something I know very little about. So I'm quite interested in learning something
Okay.
about it.
Okay, I'll present it, Timoleon. No
Okay.
problem. I'm not. Yeah, don't worry. It's if you don't feel like presenting, you don't have to. I mean, there's no.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
definitely not a pressure. No, I'm just
It's
saying
not.
that
I presented. No problem. I just want to make sure that somebody interested. Okay. All right.
I just don't forget. So tomorrow is the Volga Bulgars, and like I said, the Khazars. Just to warn you, it's a 2-day presentation preparation, so it won't be anything elaborate like Richard's presentations. It would just be something that and it would be some not necessarily history, or it would be a telltale, right? some of it is not a history because we really don't know a lot of the stuff. So, and I know a lot of people get pissed, like, what, why are you telling us telltales or, almost mythic stuff? But there is nothing really out there to go by. In
I think
history.
mythology is also very, very important, and it is to some degree. There is some history in it.
Yeah,
to
I mean, most exactly.
dig it out, whatever it is. But it's still important. It's part of the, this epic, national epic. It's part of like kind of like a national identity, something that formed as a result of this. Yeah, so yeah, those nations
That's what
didn't
I was
survive, but
presenting. I'll just
Huh?
give you an example. On Rus, the Kievan Rus, I was talking about, the monk that wrote about the primary. I don't know if you ever read the primaries about the Kievan Rus. He was around 1200s. He lived around 1200s, but he wrote about the Knyaz Oleg, Vladislav, Olga, and he wrote all about those stories. But what's interesting is when it almost sounds mythical when he said, "Oh, Varangians come and rule us because we're kind of unruly. We're not the Slavs weren't kind of like getting it together and come and organize us." There is no Viking countries before the Kievan Rus was created ever. Before that, there was no cities that were created that were Viking cities. That was literally a first Viking city, if you can think of it, or first Viking empire. And they call them Varangians, but it's almost like mystical that all of a sudden they come in and they have all their organizations, but they haven't created a country of their own. So obviously, you have to take it with a grain of salt.
You're talking about Повесть временных лет?
yeah,
Yes, primary. Yeah.
Okay. But it was written, I believe, 100 or couple hundred years at least.
Written 300 years after. It
Yeah,
was
after
1196.
right. When all the Vikings were already kind of, it was after the peak of Vikings enterprises. So our Vikings definitely were known by that time. It was for the writer, it was the past. It wasn't that he predicted this.
No, but I understand. But it's almost like when you go back and you write something, you have to obviously make it more colorful so that people could read,
Right.
and you can make it more attractive. So to speak. I mean, that's just a simple fact of it. I mean, I'm just trying to warn about the Bulgars and Hazars. There's a lot of
please don't warn. I mean, don't
Right.
warn. Why warning?
no. I mean, they're extinct ethnicities.
Yes,
Mhm.
right.
There is nothing that they left
Yeah.
behind.
Well, yeah, something was absorbed from them.
Well,
but yeah,
it was absorbed by
by others.
by a fanatic. Yeah, basically, exactly. So it's people absorb what they want to absorb. The winners make history.
Yeah, I think the ethnicity that we call Tatars nowadays, I mean, this is a conglomeration of many cultures. I mean, similar nomadic cultures at that time, and I'm sure that they're descendants partially of from both of. But anyway, all right, guys.
I'll let you go. Thank you, Greg, again.
Yeah.
I guess
Thank
you're doing Timolon, but please think about which are stuff you guys want to present. If you want to present on the ancient writings, we're looking for topics, looking for anything. I mean,
All right.
All right. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thanks a lot, Greg. Great presentation. You're the expert on the Roman on this history. I don't know much about it. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank you,
Sure.
Greg.
Thank you,
Take
guys.
care. Thanks. Bye bye.
Wow.